Thank you very much for making time available, that you put time aside. So we have this event that we call a public dialogue. Public dialogue is really what it is for us to get together and talk about issues. Have a dialogue, have a conversation, have a discussion about issues, and hopefully find solutions. So, first of all, maybe I should welcome the people who really are the reason why we are here. And key among those people are the fisheries employees, the people who have lost their jobs, the people who are affected by what we now call the Fishrot scandal, but we know it goes beyond that. So, welcome to you all. I also would like to say a word of thanks and welcome to the Friedrich Ebert Stiftung for funding this outreach project. What we wanted to do when we wrote and then launched the Fishrot book, we really wanted to launch it in Walvis, but unfortunately the logistics could not permit. The Konrad Adenauer Stiftung funded the printing of the book, but long before that, Friedrich Ebert Stiftung, through our discussion, had already indicated they would love to go beyond just the book, that we go out and break down this issue to other Namibians outside of the capital of Namibia, which we often just have too many of the activities done there and forget, as Rui was saying, that it's about people. It's not about events and launches, but really issues that affect people. The book goes beyond simply writing about what happened. It outlines what are the areas, what are the issues that led to what we have come to see as mismanagement, and in general terms, corruption. But mismanagement and corruption actually goes together. Fisheries is a huge resource of Namibia, a really big resource, or at least it used to be. It's dwindling quite fast. But it's been so mismanaged so as to benefit very few Namibians. For decades at least, as the Namibian, we've been writing since the times of, since the 1990s. Some of you might remember the Namibian exposed how former fisheries minister Abraham Iyambo, may his soul rest in peace, also got bribes from the fishing industry or from some rich people in the fishing industry to pay for his wedding. So you can imagine what effect that has, because as soon as you can afford to bribe, for instance, our mayor, the mayor will take decisions based on who pays for his nice lifestyle. And that's the essence of what really has happened in this Fishrot scandal. We get to know now that these ministers and their friends were living large, and Several of them were boasting about how hard they work, that they don't sleep, they work hard all night. But now we know they actually use their offices, the public office to which we entrusted them. We voted them to go and do work for the majority of Namibians. But people go into those offices with a certain thinking, a plan that definitely is not the contract between the voters and them. So we more or less, I think, have to thank several people for having helped us bring this kind of information out. The one person who I would thank for this book most is the lead author, an economist by the name of Roman Greenberg. Professor Greenberg came to me at the Namibian and said, do you have the guts? Are you courageous enough to get the book out? Because if we don't get this information out and rely only on the tidbits that come from the documents released by the whistleblower, or if the case ever reaches trial, that information that comes from the trial, we will never quite grasp the magnitude of what has happened. And Namibia and future generations in Namibia might just continue voting leaders into power, hoping to change things, but they themselves may not quite appreciate what it should take. So he says, and I want to read his dedication for the book. This book is dedicated first to Johannes Stefansson, the whistleblower who dared to disclose his truth about the behavior of his employer, Summary. Without him, the people of Namibia would never have known. But then he continues, this book is also dedicated to the children of Namibia who deserve better and who will never be told the truth of what has happened to them and why they live in poverty when a few of their fellow citizens become so very rich. That's really his dedication. And I would just add to that to say, not only do these people become extremely filthy rich, they become wastefully rich. Wastefully at the expense of some of you among the crowd, the employees, who didn't get to benefit from that wealth. You are the people who spent months at sea getting this resource out of the ocean. And for what? We just give it to a few people to become wastefully rich. Unfortunately, the people who actually get to control these riches just go about their lives not caring. But worst of all, how the government dishes out these resources is what we need to keep a watch for. I know our relatives get fishing quotas, fishing rights. We get excited about it. But that's just a few people. I think if I may even dare guess, not more than 10,000 people in Namibia get these fishing rights and fishing quotas. Not more than 10,000 have got it since independence. But we celebrate, we all want them to queue up and apply for fishing quotas. But guess what happens? The government gives these fishing quotas at a loss, meaning you, the public, whose wealth this is, subsidize some people to become rich. Imagine the poor subsidize the filthy rich. It's just a mirror image of what used to happen in the colonial and apartheid days. They get the resources and then just take them out of the country and waste it on nice to have things. Among the public dialogue issue, the question being asked is, have any lessons been learned? I would like to hope so. I have tried to list a few, and I hope those can also inform us, what do we do next? Among lessons I've categorized, there are good lessons learned, there are some terrible bad lessons learned, and some complete failures. And then, how do we proceed from here? Some of the good lessons learned are that it looks like the idea of sharing the fisheries cake is starting to get out there a little. Not much, but it looks like, to a certain extent, the government is now starting to understand what some people call getting the right fee when the quotas are allocated. Unfortunately, they still use this corrupt process called governmental objective quotas, but they have tested the market, and we know now they get the first year they sold about, or less than 5%, of the quotas. The government raised about 600 million in one auction. Previously, every year when the government dished out these fishing quotas, in our tax coffers we got less than 150 million a year in fees and quota levies, which means a lot of money was handed to individuals, and they go and sell the quotas for themselves, do nothing, declare a profit and a dividend before the fish is even out of the water, and go on and live a nice life. Few, very few people. So when we get invited as the media, for instance, to cover a story of Erongo Marine celebrating, or at least offering their employees 13 million in total, or 65,000 per employee as dividend, we go, yes, that's a step in the right direction. Why can't employees share substantially in the dividends? Because it's their sweat. Why can't government raise enough revenue that goes into the tax coffers so that it can pay for schools, pay for hospitals, and pay for other key amenities that people need? Another perhaps small positive that has come out of this exposure of the Fishrot scandal is now the government is giving companies these quotas to re-employ people who they ignored for years after they have caused them to lose their jobs. So it's a positive. It's I don't think it's the right way to go about it because I think it's just politics they are playing. But at least it's a small positive out of it. First Media bringing us here to discuss this matter. I think it's a positive lesson that we have learned. We can't just write the news, write books, and hope that people will read them and therefore continue to do something about it. But when we discuss it as a community, that would get us somewhere. And another small positive is we have now seen that the government can act against corruption. It's a pity that we have people sitting in jail without trial for that long. We would want this case to come to trial very soon, but at least when the reports are issued and they know that they can suffer election defeat, then suddenly they can fire people out of government and arrest them. So it is your action of putting pressure on the government that will get us somewhere. So that's a lesson that we must not forget. Bad lessons, unfortunately, when we have the president complaining that he is pained, he's feeling the pain that his comrades are sitting in jail, without saying, I'm feeling pain that so many people are suffering from because these resources have been abused, then we have a problem. We have not learned a lesson. Yes. Last week, the Fishing Industry Association was complaining to the government that the government is now setting up a parallel system of fishing quotas. And in the words of the fishing industry, their complaint was that only a few companies are now going to benefit. Wow, that's interesting, that the fishing industry players themselves who have been benefiting from these fishing quotas and fishing rights are now seeing that there is a major problem with the laws and the policies and the process by which these fishing rights and fishing quotas are allocated. Sadly, recently the Minister of Fisheries convinced Cabinet and got the right to have an area offshore in the ocean which used to be reserved for breeding, for research. This area they will now allow fishing companies to go and get fish out of that. Now, you can imagine, it's like going into a maternity ward and you are taking out the babies, the eggs, and everything. You are destroying the maternity ward, which means the fishing industry itself is in danger. That's a terrible lesson, which suggests people are more concerned for short-term gain. And the companies which have been pushing for this and are likely to benefit, among those companies is gender fishing. I know they have been lobbying the government, as well as the companies that were involved in the Fishrot scandal, sea flower pelagic. Now, gender fishing, we know, it's got quite some key shareholders, and among them are people related to the deputy president, for instance. So decisions are still being taken to benefit the people, those few people, and wrongly so. So our laws that have led to the fishing scandal have not been changed at all. That shows we have not learned a lesson, or at least we have learned a bad lesson, that we still continue doing exactly the same things. So those are failures, and for me, backward. We are going backward, and unless communities like you here keep getting together, understand what it takes to put politicians under pressure to change, expect nothing. I know, for instance, there were examples long before I think Esau came into the Ministry of Fisheries, or maybe it was during his time. Some people went around registering, don't you want to go in a company with us? We are, you are going to get fishing rights and then fishing quotas. Eventually, one of the women who were, actually some women who were put there, one was disabled. She only later on learned that people have been getting millions of dollars. When she found out about it, complained, they bought her a $20,000 watch and gave her, they threw a big birthday party for her. For a while, she kept quiet. But then thereafter, she realized this robbery of her shares continued. So I'm using that example because we get bored very quickly. Come election time next year, we will probably be told, you will get, as Rui was saying when we are coming here, you will all get $5,000 basic income grant every month. Don't worry, we've got oil and green hydrogen. Just vote for us. We will make sure you live well thereafter. Promises like those don't last. We have to learn to understand, to ask, how are you going to pay for that? How are you going to afford these resources? I think there were some people who were employed, was it since last year, by companies like Tunacor. Here are the fishing quotas. Please employ these fishermen who don't have work. Okay, they got the fishing quotas. Eventually, I think those companies, some of them said, look, actually, we will pay you. You don't need to be employed. It's all right. You stay at home, we will pay you. Sure, I can really sympathize with people who say, I would rather take that than nothing at all. But it's a short-term fix. It's a short-term approach that will take us nowhere. The long-term approach is for us to understand how do these things work. It's almost like me having a child, my 18-year-old or 20-year-old son coming home with a brand new spanking car, and I know this chap only started his job a few months ago. And when I don't ask, how are you able to afford this car? And if I don't ask that, I'm only creating problems down the line, major problems down the line. And I think that's what us voters don't want to do. We don't want to ask those tough questions. Hopefully, those are some of the lessons that we should take from the past several years of the exposure of this scandal. Thank you very much. Welcome to this dialogue.